Nobody wants to visit Los Angeles anymore, and the reason why might shock you more than you think. Once the shining jewel of American tourism, the city that promised glamour, sunshine, and dreams is now watching its streets empty out as visitors turn away in record numbers. Over 170,000 fewer international tourists arrived in just 3 months during 2025, and the decline shows no sign of stopping. Something fundamental has changed in the City of Angels, and what you are about to discover will make you see this iconic destination in a completely different light. This is not just about numbers dropping or hotels losing business. This is about a city that once represented possibility itself, now becoming a warning, a cautionary tale whispered across continents. The question is not whether Los Angeles is in trouble. The question is, how did the most visited destination in the Western United States become a place people actively avoid? And what does this reveal about the promises we were all sold about the American dream? We all remember what Los Angeles used to represent. Sunlight dancing on palm trees, the Hollywood sign glowing against azure skies, beaches stretching endlessly where dreams took flight. For generations, the very name Los Angeles conjured images of transformation, where ordinary people became extraordinary, where stories became legends. International visitors saved for years to walk down Hollywood Boulevard, to touch the stars embedded in concrete, to breathe the same air as their screen idols. Families planned trips around Disneyland and Universal Studios. Couples honeymooned along the Pacific Coast Highway. And every culture on Earth sent its dreamers westward to witness the capital of reinvention. The city welcomed over $30 billion in tourism revenue annually, sustaining hundreds of thousands of jobs and fueling an economic engine that seemed unstoppable. This was more than a destination. This was mythology made tangible, a place where anyone could rewrite their story simply by arriving. Hotels thrived, restaurants flourished, and every street corner pulsed with the energy of people chasing something bigger than themselves. You have felt this pull too, that magnetic attraction to a city that promised every sunset could change your life. But the Los Angeles tourists encounter now tells a radically different story, one where the golden promise has tarnished beyond recognition. Hollywood Boulevard, once shoulder to shoulder with eager visitors, has seen foot traffic plummet by 50% in just one summer. Businesses that once served lines of tourists now watch empty sidewalks through their windows, their exotic car rentals sitting idle, their souvenir shops gathering dust. Salim Osman, who works for Ride Like a Star near the TCL Chinese Theater, remembers when crowds lined up to rent Ferraris and Porsches for $200 an hour, when capturing that quintessential Los Angeles selfie meant waiting your turn among dozens of excited visitors. Now he watches the boulevard from his station and sees ghosts where crowds used to gather. It used to be shoulder to shoulder out here, he says, staring down a street that once represented the beating heart of American entertainment culture. The tourists who do arrive spend less, stay shorter, and leave faster than ever before. What changed? How did the city of dreams become the city people fear? The numbers reveal a crisis that extends far beyond a single bad season or temporary setback. International tourist arrivals to Los Angeles dropped by 8% in the 3 months through August 2025, representing more than 170,000 fewer global visitors compared to the previous year. In August alone, arrivals slipped by 7.5% compared to 2024. These are not marginal fluctuations or statistical anomalies. These represent a fundamental rejection of Los Angeles as a desirable destination, a mass turning away that accelerates month after month. Tourism revenue, which once reached $30 billion annually, has collapsed to $15 billion, a 50% plunge that ripples through every sector of the local economy. Hotels report unprecedented vacancy rates, restaurants struggle to fill tables, and attractions that once required advance booking now welcome whoever wanders through. The broader California economy feels the shock too, with the state welcoming 695,654 fewer visitors in August 2025 alone compared to the same month the previous year. This is not a story about temporary difficulties or seasonal variations. This is a structural collapse of confidence in a destination that represented America itself to much of the world. You have seen the images that changed everything, burned into global consciousness with shocking clarity. January 2025 brought the Eaton and Palisades fires, catastrophic blazes that consumed neighborhoods and turned skies apocalyptic orange. Television screens worldwide displayed flames devouring hillsides, smoke billowing over celebrity mansions, firefighters overwhelmed by the scale of destruction. These were not distant wildfires happening somewhere rural and remote. These fires tore through communities adjacent to tourist destinations, visible from hotels and attractions, close enough to taste the ash in the air. International audiences watched in horror as a city supposedly built on sunshine and prosperity revealed itself unable to prevent or contain disasters that seemed almost biblical in their fury. The fires exposed something deeper than immediate danger. They revealed infrastructure inadequacy, emergency response failures, and a city fundamentally unprepared to protect itself or its visitors. If Los Angeles cannot keep its own residents safe, why would tourists trust their families to its care? The fires became a symbol, a visual metaphor for a city burning through its promises, its glamour consumed by flames that government seemed powerless to stop. But the fires were only the beginning of a cascade that drove visitors away in ever greater numbers. June 2025 brought immigration crackdowns that made international headlines and sparked fear across continents. Federal immigration raids swept through Los Angeles with aggressive enforcement tactics that many observers described as indiscriminate and traumatizing. Families were separated, communities were terrorized, and the message transmitted globally was unmistakable. Los Angeles, and America by extension, was not welcoming foreigners anymore. The policies emanated from the Trump administration, whose unpredictable tariff wars and hostile rhetoric toward international cooperation convinced countless potential tourists that America had become dangerous, unstable, and unwelcoming. Why would a Mexican family vacation where their relatives might be detained? Why would European visitors risk encountering hostile enforcement in a country whose president vilifies their home nations? The immigration crackdowns did not just affect undocumented residents. They poisoned the entire perception of Los Angeles as a destination, transforming the city from welcoming to hostile in the global imagination. Tourism operators across the city report the same refrain from potential visitors. It is too hard to come now, or we are afraid of what is happening there, or we just do not feel safe anymore. Walk through Los Angeles today and you will encounter the visible manifestations of urban decay that cameras cannot hide and promotional materials can spin away. Homelessness has exploded to crisis proportions, with over 198,000 individuals experiencing homelessness across Los Angeles County, according to the 2024 count. That represents an 18% increase from the previous year, and a trend that has accelerated relentlessly. The city of Los Angeles itself contains approximately 176,000 people without stable housing. Individuals living in tents that line sidewalks, even in expensive residential neighborhoods. These are not statistics tucked away in policy reports. These are human beings, visible on every major street, in parks where families once played, along beaches where tourists once sunbathed. Encampments sprawl across areas adjacent to major attractions, creating scenes of poverty and desperation that shock visitors expecting the polished facade they saw in movies. International tourists arrive expecting glamour and encounter suffering on a scale many have never witnessed in their home countries. The contrast between Hollywood mythology and street reality becomes too jarring to ignore, too disturbing to photograph, too uncomfortable to share with friends back home. Crime compounds the sense of danger and decline, creating an atmosphere where fear replaces the carefree excitement tourism requires. The Los Angeles Police Department reported approximately 12% increases in overall violent crime in 2024 compared to 2022, with property crimes rising alongside personal safety threats. Visitors report incidents ranging from petty theft and vandalism to more serious offenses, creating viral social media posts warning others to avoid the city entirely. Tourists accustomed to safe, well-maintained environments encounter urban chaos that makes them question why they left home. Car break-ins occur in broad daylight near major attractions. Aggressive behavior from individuals experiencing mental health crises frightens families with children. And the visible absence of effective law enforcement leaves visitors feeling exposed and vulnerable. The city that once promised magical experiences now delivers anxiety and vigilance, forcing tourists to constantly watch their belongings, avoid certain areas, and cut their visits short. Word spreads quickly in the interconnected digital age. One frightening experience becomes 1,000 warnings shared across travel forums, social media groups, and family conversations. The city is losing not just current visitors, but future generations who will grow up hearing Los Angeles described as dangerous rather than dreamlike. The entertainment industry that once defined Los Angeles' identity is itself collapsing, removing a fundamental pillar of the city's appeal. Hollywood has shed an estimated 42,000 jobs over the past 2 years, a hemorrhaging of creative talent that represents more than employment statistics. These are the craft guilds, the union workers, the skilled technicians who brought stories to life and gave the city its cultural purpose. Production has fled to lower-cost domestic locations like New Orleans and Atlanta, or moved overseas entirely, where tax incentives and cheaper labor make economic sense. The rise of artificial intelligence threatens even the remaining creative positions, raising the specter of a Hollywood emptied of the human artists who made it legendary. Neighborhoods like Valley Village that once thrived on entertainment industry workers now watch those communities dissolve, their local economies built on creative labor evaporating as productions move elsewhere. For tourists, this means the magic is literally leaving town. The chance to glimpse movie stars, witness production in action, or feel connected to the glamour that made Los Angeles special diminishes daily. A city without its defining industry becomes just another expensive coastal destination with better weather elsewhere and fewer problems. Housing costs have become so prohibitive that even residents are fleeing in unprecedented numbers, creating a doom loop that accelerates Los Angeles' decline. The median asking price for a house reached $797,470 in 2022, affordable to only 1/4 of households in the state. Rent has become equally crushing, forcing nearly 3/4 of renters and those under 35 to seriously consider leaving the city entirely. Los Angeles led the nation in outbound migration, with over 26,100 residents departing in November 2023 alone, seeking affordable living and better quality of life in states like Texas, Arizona, and Nevada. This exodus is not random or temporary. This represents a fundamental rejection of the California economic model, where costs have spiraled beyond any reasonable relationship to quality of life or opportunity. When even successful middle-class residents cannot afford to stay, when young adults give up on building futures in the city, the vitality that attracts tourists drains away. Tourists visit destinations that feel alive, dynamic, and exciting. They avoid cities that locals are desperately trying to escape. The message transmitted by mass migration is unmistakable. If people who live here cannot bear to stay, why would visitors want to come? The city government appears paralyzed or ineffective in addressing any of these cascading crises, deepening the sense that Los Angeles has lost control of its own destiny. Residents and visitors alike report visible increases in urban decay, with little corresponding action from authorities. Street cleaning neglects major thoroughfares, graffiti remains uncleaned for months, and public spaces that once welcomed families now feel abandoned and unsafe. Mayor Karen Bass declared emergencies and implemented initiatives, yet the problems continue accelerating faster than solutions can address them. The homeless crisis persists despite increased funding and attention. Crime rises despite policing efforts. Housing remains unaffordable despite policy interventions. To outside observers and potential tourists, Los Angeles appears to be a city unable to manage its basic functions, a place where governance has failed to maintain the minimal standards that make urban life livable. Why would tourists choose a destination whose own government cannot keep its residents safe, housed, and secure? The perception of governmental failure becomes self-fulfilling as visitors avoid the city, reducing revenue that could fund improvements, creating a vicious cycle where decline accelerates decline. Remote work transformed migration patterns in ways that specifically damaged Los Angeles' appeal and economic base. When location independence became common during and after the pandemic, high-income professionals reassessed why they tolerated Los Angeles costs and problems. They could earn California salaries while living in states with no income tax, affordable housing, lower crime, and better quality of life. The migration was not random. High-income Californians predominantly moved to states without income taxes: Florida, Texas, Nevada, Tennessee, Washington. They took their spending power, their cultural capital, and their entrepreneurial energy elsewhere. For Los Angeles, this represents brain drain and wealth flight simultaneously, hollowing out the professional class that sustained restaurants, entertainment, retail, and services. The city becomes less interesting, less dynamic, and less appealing to visitors as its most successful residents abandon it. Tourism depends on destinations feeling vital and aspirational. A city that successful people are fleeing signals failure rather than possibility, creating a narrative that repels rather than attracts visitors. Political polarization compounds Los Angeles problems in ways that drive away visitors from across ideological spectrums. Republicans avoid the city because they see it as a symbol of progressive policy failure, where homelessness, crime, and decay prove the bankruptcy of liberal governance. Democrats increasingly avoid it because the visible suffering conflicts with their values, and the city's inability to address problems despite progressive leadership raises uncomfortable questions. According to research from the Public Policy Institute of California, 39% of those who left California between the 2020 and 2024 presidential elections were Republicans, creating a selective migration that intensifies political homogeneity while reducing the diverse perspectives that make destinations interesting. International tourists from conservative countries perceive Los Angeles as chaotic and permissive beyond their comfort levels. Visitors from progressive nations see the homelessness and inequality as moral failures, incompatible with their values. The city manages to alienate potential tourists across the political spectrum, becoming a destination nobody wants to defend or recommend regardless of their beliefs. Traffic and infrastructure failures create daily miseries that tourists experience firsthand and remember long after leaving. Los Angeles traffic has been legendary for decades, but inadequate investment in transportation infrastructure and continued sprawl have transformed inconvenience into impossibility. Visitors attempting to see multiple attractions discover that simple distances require hours in gridlock, turning vacation days into frustration marathons. Public transportation remains inadequate for a city of Los Angeles' size and spread, forcing rental car dependence that plunges tourists directly into the traffic nightmare. The environmental cost becomes visible too, with air quality suffering from vehicle emissions at levels that shock visitors from countries with better air standards. Infrastructure decay extends beyond roads to basic utilities and services. Water restrictions remind visitors that California cannot reliably supply its population. Power grid vulnerabilities raise fears of blackouts. The city feels precarious, held together by aging systems inadequate for current demands and future challenges. Tourists notice these things. They compare Los Angeles infrastructure to cities in Asia, Europe, and even other American destinations, and Los Angeles comes up short. Why vacation in a city that cannot provide basic services reliably? The fires, you have to understand, were not isolated events, but symptoms of a larger environmental crisis that makes Los Angeles increasingly unlivable and uninsurable. Climate change has transformed California fire seasons from periodic dangers into year-round threats, with insurance companies abandoning the market because risks have become too severe to cover profitably. Tourists booking Los Angeles vacations now check fire maps and air quality indices alongside weather forecasts, wondering if their trips will be canceled or ruined by smoke and evacuations. The psychological impact of environmental precariousness cannot be overstated. Los Angeles sold itself as a paradise of permanent sunshine and perfect weather. The reality of apocalyptic fires, drought restrictions, and climate instability shatters that promise completely. Families planning vacations prioritize safety and predictability above adventure. When Los Angeles cannot guarantee either, they book elsewhere. The environmental crisis also raises ethical questions for environmentally conscious travelers who increasingly avoid destinations with terrible carbon footprints and ecological mismanagement. Los Angeles' dependence on cars, water transported hundreds of miles, and unsustainable sprawl conflicts with the values of tourists who want their travel to reflect environmental responsibility. You see similar patterns across California, suggesting systemic problems beyond Los Angeles specifically. Las Vegas reported visitor volume down 8% from January to July 2025. San Francisco struggles with similar homelessness crises and downtown decay. The entire West Coast appears to be experiencing a tourism reckoning, where decades of policy failures, environmental challenges, and social problems have accumulated to critical mass. California contains nearly 30% of the United States homeless population, despite representing only 12% of national population, a concentration of suffering that signals profound governance and economic failures. The state's restrictive zoning policies, over-reliance on sales taxes, and property tax structures created by Proposition 13 in 1978 have constrained housing supply and created affordability crises that no amount of good intentions can solve within current frameworks. These are not problems any single mayor or governor can fix through executive action. These require fundamental restructuring of policies, priorities, and economic models that have been entrenched for generations. Tourists witnessing these problems do not care about the complex historical and policy reasons behind them. They simply see a destination failing to deliver the experience they expected and choose to spend their money elsewhere. The collapse accelerates itself through network effects and reputation destruction that operate at internet speed. Every negative experience shared on social media reaches thousands or millions of potential visitors. Each viral post about crime or homelessness doing damage that no marketing budget can repair. Travel influencers with massive followings post warnings rather than recommendations, their content shifting from aspirational to cautionary. Review sites fill with one-star ratings describing disappointment, fear, and regret. Tourism requires positive word of mouth to sustain itself, that magical quality where satisfied visitors become unpaid ambassadors, encouraging friends and family to follow. Los Angeles has lost that virtuous cycle entirely, replaced by a vicious cycle where each departing tourist warns others away. The city's reputation internationally has shifted from aspirational to pitied, from a destination people dream about to one they discuss as a cautionary tale about American decline. Once reputation shifts that fundamentally, recovery requires not just solving problems, but rebuilding trust across continents and demographics, a process that takes decades even under ideal circumstances. But that is not even the worst part. The decline in tourism creates a self-reinforcing death spiral that makes recovery progressively harder. Lost tourism revenue means reduced tax income for city and state governments, forcing budget cuts that reduce services and worsen the problems driving tourists away. Hotels lay off staff as occupancy plummet, creating unemployment that increases homelessness and crime. Restaurants close as foot traffic disappears, eliminating gathering places that made neighborhoods feel alive and safe. Attractions reduce hours or close entirely, making the city less interesting and justifying further visitor declines. Each business closure reduces foot traffic, increases visible vacancies, and makes neighborhoods feel more dangerous and less maintained. Property values decline in tourism-dependent areas, reducing tax revenue further and encouraging property neglect. The economic damage spreads outward from tourism epicenters into adjacent neighborhoods and related industries, creating widening circles of decline that eventually touch every resident and business. Reversing this spiral requires massive intervention and investment at exactly the moment when declining revenue reduces capacity for such action. It is a trap, a doom loop that cities rarely escape without external shock or complete reinvention. Major events coming to Los Angeles make the tourism decline even more concerning and embarrassing. The city is scheduled to host World Cup matches and the Summer Olympics in upcoming years, events that should showcase Los Angeles to global audiences and generate billions in revenue. Instead, these events now appear as potential disasters where international visitors will witness firsthand the gap between Los Angeles mythology and its current reality. Imagine hundreds of thousands of Olympic visitors encountering homeless encampments blocks from stadiums, experiencing crime, sitting in traffic for hours, breathing smoke-filled air if fires coincide with the games. The potential for reputational catastrophe exceeds even current problems, as a failed Olympics or chaotic World Cup would cement Los Angeles' decline in global consciousness for generations. The city faces a choice. Invest massively in temporary fixes that address surface problems for cameras while core issues fester, or acknowledge that it cannot provide experiences worthy of such events and face the humiliation of withdrawal or failure. Neither option suggests a destination tourists should trust with their vacation investments. Empty tables, empty streets, empty dreams. This is what remains when the mythology collapses and the reality becomes too harsh to ignore. Los Angeles promised transformation and delivered stagnation, promised safety and delivered fear, promised dreams and delivered disillusionment. The tourists who still arrive often leave wondering what they paid for, struggling to reconcile the city they expected with the city they encountered. The vendors who depend on tourism watch their livelihoods evaporate, wondering what comes next when the industry that sustained them dies. The residents who remain endure worsening conditions as tax revenue declines and services deteriorate further. This is not just an economic story about tourism numbers and revenue drops. This is a story about broken promises and shattered myths, about a city that represented possibility itself becoming a symbol of American decline. When the City of Angels falls, what does that say about the American project, about the dreams we sell ourselves and the world, about opportunity, renewal, and hope? Perhaps Los Angeles was always more myth than reality, more marketing than substance. A story we told ourselves about what America could be rather than an honest accounting of what it was. The fires burned away the facade, revealing the inequality, the exploitation, the unsustainability that lay beneath the glamorous surface. The homeless crisis made visible the human cost of an economic system that creates massive wealth for a few while abandoning everyone else to streets and suffering. The tourism collapse measures how completely the story stopped working, how thoroughly people stopped believing the promises Los Angeles represented. You cannot sell dreams when reality intrudes too harshly, cannot market sunshine when smoke blocks the sky, cannot promise opportunity when residents flee and visitors avoid. Los Angeles taught the world to dream in Technicolor and perfect lighting. Now it teaches a different lesson about what happens when dreams confront reality without the budget for special effects or the option of reshooting scenes until they work. The cameras are still rolling, but nobody wants to watch anymore. The stage is still set, but the audience has left the theater. If you have felt this change too, this sense that something fundamental has broken in a place that once seemed eternal, you are not imagining it. The decline is real, measurable, accelerating. Share your story in the comments if Los Angeles meant something to you once, if you remember when the city represented magic instead of warning, and if you found this eye-opening, subscribe, because the next story might reveal where everyone is going next, what destinations are rising as Los Angeles falls, what new myths will replace the ones that no longer sustain us. It is time we remember what cities used to mean before they became cautionary tales. Time we understand what we lost when we allowed dreams to die untended, and time we decide whether any of this can be recovered or if Los Angeles decline represents something larger and more permanent about the American moment we inhabit now. The truth they do not want you to know is simpler and sadder than conspiracy. Nobody wants to visit Los Angeles anymore because Los Angeles stopped being worth visiting, stopped being the city it promised to be, stopped believing in itself enough to deserve belief from anyone else. That is the truth. That is what the numbers measure. That is why the tourists are gone.